Welcome to the What's Happening Birmingham video podcast.
What lies inside all of us is more than data. It's life. What's flowing through America's veins is its diversity. We ask for 1 million individuals to come forward and stand on this landmark in history. All of us are different, and it's those very differences that will lead to answers for generations to come.
Hello, everyone. This is Jarvis S. Scott with What's Happening in Birmingham. Today, I'm back again talking about the All of Us research program. And today, I have the honor and pleasure of having Dr. Bruce Korf. He is the principal investigator for the All of Us research program. Dr. Korf, good morning.
Good morning.
Great. Thank you for coming on today. I guess before I start, if you Google Dr. Korf, he has an impressive bio. And I don't think I can actually say everything you have accomplished, because before I started the interview, I said, man, you have lived multiple lives in the medical field. So can you give us kind of like a quick little 1-2 minute bio?
Sure. So right now I'm Associate Dean for Genomic Medicine at University of Alabama at Birmingham and the Hersing School of Medicine. I'm a medical geneticist. I have an MD and a PhD. The PhD is in genetics, and did my training in Boston in pediatrics, child neurology, and genetics, and have been at UAB for 20 years, originally as the chair of the Department of Genetics for 15, and then after that, Associate Dean for Genomic Medicine. And I'm the contact principal investigator for the All of Us Southern Network, which includes sites in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana.
So when people ask you about principal investigator role, what does that entail?
Well, being the principal investigator means that you have overall responsibility for the conduct of the project. In this case, we're talking about as mentioned, the All of Us Southern Network, including about 10 sites altogether. And so my responsibilities, and I have two co-principal investigators, I should say, but my responsibilities are managing the budget for the program, making sure that we meet the milestones in terms of enrollments and retention milestones, for example, that all of the sites are performing as expected and delivering the things that they're supposed to do. So it's really managing the project overall.
So for the people who haven't seen the previous interviews or even seen the previous advertisements I promote about it, what is the All of Us research program to you?
The All of Us research program is a program that is sponsored by and actually run by the National Institutes of Health, and it's intended to provide the data and the information that will permit what often is referred to as precision or personalized medicine to be deployed across all individuals in the United States in coming years, even arguably in coming generations. We're at a point now where the tools are available to be able to identify individuals who are at risk of disease, or if they develop disease, to find better ways to treat them on an individualized basis. But doing that requires a lot of information about the various risk factors for disease, the markers that tell you who's at risk, and then identifying underlying causes. And the All of Us research program is an effort to enroll at least 1 million people across the country, reflecting the diversity of the country so that all individuals can benefit from these medical advances.
So how is this role different? I mean, how is this program different from previous research programs you've done in the past?
Well, this is a program that is, huge in scale, far greater in size than any previous program of its kind, actually anywhere in the world. The idea of enrolling 1 million people, obtaining both medical and biological information, including genetic information,
Mhm.
is unprecedented. So, this is sort of astronomical in scale, whereas previous studies have been much more, you might say, down to earth in terms of looking at very specific individual things with usually, hundreds to thousands, maybe to tens of thousands of people, but nothing on this scale. And it takes this kind of scale to dissect out the relatively sometimes subtle clues that tell you about why some people develop an illness and other people don't.
So, I want to go back to that for a moment. So, like going back, so this is different. I know the viewer may probably watching and say, okay, I go in, I get regular lab work, which, draw blood, maybe urine tests. What is about the All of Us program that goes deeper than that?
Well, when a person gets a blood or a urine test today in their health provider's office, they're looking for a handful of things that are pretty well understood. I guess a good example would be evidence of diabetes. Is your blood sugar too high? Are you spilling sugar into your urine? Those kinds of things that tell you here and now that you might be experiencing either early signs of diabetes or maybe even advanced signs. But the really important question isn't, can I make a diagnosis of diabetes today? It's, can I figure out in advance that here's a person who is at risk of diabetes, hasn't yet developed the condition, but we know that they're on the road towards doing so. And can we do something that would prevent that outcome? Because it would be far better to treat a condition like diabetes early. And not only that, but also to customize the treatment to the particular way that person reacts to medications, and to optimize the exactly right medicine for that individual, hopefully so that they never do develop diabetes. So we're really looking towards combination of better tools at identifying people at risk and better treatments so that we can effectively treat them and minimize side effects.
Okay, I think I went to the website and I think I saw this term is called genetic sequencing.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, all of us have in more or less every cell in our body the genetic information that first of all is responsible for human development as an embryo, and then for essentially carrying out all the physiological functions in terms of day-to-day life. And that information is encoded within the nucleus of the cell in the form of the chemical molecule DNA, which probably most people have heard of. And DNA is, you might think of it as an exceedingly large sort of cookbook telling the cell how to make various proteins, which are the things that lend structure to the body and carry out various chemical reactions. And so coded within the DNA is all of the information it takes to produce from the fertilized egg a human infant, and then helps to control how an infant ultimately develops into an adult. And trying to decode that information to read the program has been the subject of research over the last several decades, culminating in the completion of the Human Genome Project, where the entire, which is really 3 billion letters of the genetic code, and everybody has 2 copies when they inherit from their mother, 1 from their father. So we're talking altogether about 6 billion letters of the genetic code that are part of the makeup of every person. And now the question is, yes, we can read that. That's what genome sequencing does. It reads the genetic code for a given individual. Well, the thing is that if you compare any 2 people, you're going to find that 99.9% of the letters are the same. 0.1% may not sound like a lot, but when you're talking about 0.1% of 3 billion, it adds up. So you've got millions and millions of genetic differences from one person to the next. Now, most of them are not of great significance. In fact, most of them probably have no medical significance. But among them, first of all, there are some that might be an explanation for why a particular individual has a major genetic condition. For example, sickle cell anemia would be a familiar one, or cystic fibrosis would be another. But beyond that, we also know that there are genetic variants that by themselves don't cause disease, but they do put a person at increased risk of disease. And trying to sort out which those are, what are the genetic factors that make it more likely that one person will develop high blood pressure and another person will develop diabetes, and maybe somebody else will develop asthma. Now, none of these is 100% determined by genetics, but genetics plays a role. And if we can begin to dissect out what those genes are and how they work, from that, we believe will come tools that will help us to identify people at risk, prevent disease wherever possible, and to treat it more effectively.
Now, with this particular research study, we'll also be looking at, also, I like how you said, treat the disease as far as like healthy habits, as far as like going forward, like if you know you're at risk of getting diabetes, you know that, okay, I lay off the sugar a little bit, lay off the sweets.
Right. So, first off, I wouldn't want to create the impression that we think that, genetics is the entire answer to any of these conditions. They are complex and always probably the outcome of combination of genetic risk factors and environmental factors, behaviors, pretty much the entire life history of an individual sort of feeds into this, and then out comes the possibility of disease. And so we're not trying to suggest that the genetics are the cause of everything or the answer to everything. And in fact, the All of Us program is collecting information on environmental history and based on surveys, personal habits, and things of that kind. So it's really a complex equation, and we're trying as best possible to capture as much as possible to integrate all of that into the study. So genetics is a big part of it, but by no means the only part of it. And when you do identify an individual at risk, obviously the next question is, so what can you do about it? And that varies greatly depending on what the condition is. There are instances where there might be medications that would be prescribed, and you would customize both the choice of medicine and the dosage to the way that person interacts with medications, first of all. Secondly, there could be medical surveillance done. Somebody is at risk of cancer now, and you'd be watching them closely with appropriate techniques to try to detect it as quickly as possible, as early as possible, so that the treatment outcomes are better. But indeed, some of the things that might come of this is to realize that a particular person needs to pay attention to their diet, to patterns of exercise and things of that kind. Now, really, we'd probably argue everybody should be paying attention to diet and exercise, and that is, I'm sure, true, but it can be motivational to realize that you're at risk greater than somebody else of developing diabetes, and you can make a difference to that risk and avoid some of the really serious outcomes. And although, it's easier said than done, I'm sure, for people to change their diet or their lifestyle, we do hope that if we identify people whose risk is greater, that they'll at least factor that into their thinking as they decide how to respond.
Okay, and I guess my next topic, the question I want to veer into, it's kind of going back to it, but I think it goes off of your being in the medical profession. How has human genetic studies evolved over the years to get us to this point?
So human genetics, I guess you could say it traces its origin now 150 years to the time of Mendel, when, of course, he wasn't working in humans, he was working with pea plants, but he identified the properties of genetic inheritance, or the patterns of inheritance, that have not only held true in plants, but apply really to all animals, and of course also to humans. And it became recognized, probably at this point, it would be at the beginning of the 20th century, that there are indeed human traits that seem to behave according to these rules of inheritance. But from that point, let's say from the early 1900s to about mid-century, really had no idea how it worked. We knew we could describe patterns of inheritance pretty well. We could say, for example, that if a child has sickle cell anemia, that's a recessive. It requires that both parents be carriers. They won't show signs of the condition themselves, but there's a 1 in 4 chance that they would each pass the copy of the globin gene that carries the genetic variation to a child. So 1 in 4 of their children will be affected. That we knew. But until about mid-century, last century, we didn't really understand how that worked. When DNA was discovered to be the genetic material, and then not too long after, the basic structure of DNA was defined by Watson and Crick, that generated a flurry of research that brought us into the cell and to understanding the basic mechanisms by which genes actually exert their effect. And so it could become known then that, for example, the sickle cell mutation actually alters the structure of one of the components of the hemoglobin molecule, and that causes the red blood cells to assume the sickle shape, which causes them to get stuck in blood vessels, and that's what leads to the many complications of that condition. So over the course of, I'd say, time from mid 20th century right to the end of the 20th century, there was really a kind of renaissance of research understanding how genes behave in cells, and that culminated in the completion of the Human Genome Project, which was an international project aimed to deciphering the genetic code and to being able to describe exactly what the different genes are. And of course, that was a huge landmark and provides tools that I can tell you when I started, I don't think I could have dreamt of, but it's only the beginning really, because when you have the entire genetic code before you, there's still a great deal of work that has to be done to figure out how those genes work, what turns them on or off at particular times, how do they interact with one another and with the environment, which are the ones that are important to health, and in what way is that kind of influence exerted, and does it suggest underlying mechanisms of disease we would previously not have even guessed at, that then permit us to develop new treatments. So genetics research has moved over a period of 150 plus years from observation and description to understanding mechanism, and that's the point that we're at right now.
One of the things I like about this program is that, like, once a person go in and they get the lab work, you all give us the information behind this. You actually have a quote unquote genetic counselor that explains all of this.
Yeah, I think we came to realize as a field, I wouldn't say it was me specifically, but the people working in genetics, I would say back in about the 1960s or so, began to realize that there's a lot of complexity in trying to help people understand genetic risks based on either family history or genetic testing. And as genetic testing has become more and more powerful, the need to explain to individuals and even to health providers how this works and what it means to them is a time-consuming, complicated process. And that generated the discipline of genetic counseling, which involves training of individuals in the principles of genetics, but also in the principles of counseling, in helping people understand complex information that may have relevance to their health. And it has resulted in a group of people who work professionally now to serve as kind of interpreters of genetic and genomic information to individuals so that it can help inform their medical decision making.
Okay, and of course now we're on talking about DNA. How does the All of Us research program ensure DNA and data security for its participants?
Yeah, data security and privacy issues are really one of the central kind of tenets of the program, because we know that without being able to ensure the privacy and security of information, it would be impossible to achieve the goals of the program. So it's accomplished in several ways. All of the information, whether it's genetic information or medical information, is first of all de-identified, so the researchers have no idea of the actual identity of individuals whose information they may be working with. All of those pieces of data are removed when the data are kind of put into a place where they can be analyzed. There is, state-of-the-art encryption and security built in, and it's tested on a regular basis. There's a principle of transparency if problems should occur to acknowledge those, but most importantly, tremendous effort to prevent those from occurring in the first place. And beyond that, there is also, for example, a certificate of confidentiality that applies to the program. And what that means is that the information collected by the All of Us research program is not accessible to any individual, outside the program, including law enforcement. Many people hear these stories about how the police go into public databases of genetic information and trace crimes that might have occurred a long time ago and figure out, somebody whose DNA is in the program, or maybe even a relative kind of implicates them. Well, that kind of thing can't happen in the All of Us research program. Those things happen when people put their data out in public databases where anybody can see it. Mm-hmm. But here, it's first of all not accessible, but secondly, it's not even possible for the authorities to access it, because their certificate of confidentiality means that it's not possible, let's say, for a court to subpoena the data. They have no access to it, and they never will. So none of those kind of uses in terms of the legal system have any possibility of accessing the All of Us research program data.
One thing you spoke about earlier, you said like going back to precision medicine is not like a one shot fits all type of thing. I just want you to reflect and kind of talk about the importance of diversity in this research program.
Yeah, no, it's a critically important point, because the whole premise of this is everybody's different. The specific combination of genetic and environmental, lifestyle factors and so forth that makes any individual who they are, it's going to be different from one person to another. And hence, if you're going to begin to try to personalize care, you have to understand what are the individual factors that influence risk of disease and reaction to treatment. Well, when you then look at this on a population scale, what we have learned is that the population histories of different groups are different in terms of parts of the world they came from and the kinds of environmental stresses that they were subject to historically. And that means that in many cases, there were genetic differences that arose in different groups of individuals that may be relatively shared within a group, but are different from one group to the next. And that in part reflects just the kind of the ancestral history of different groups of people. And if you don't take account of those, then you could actually be giving misleading information. For example, there are known instances of genetic traits that are more common in individuals from one part of the world than from another part of the world. And there are also instances of genetic traits that might be related to disease in one group and not so much in another group. There may be genetic variants that are more prevalent in one group than another, and may behave differently even in the setting of the entire genetic background. So the main point of this is, if you look in the last, say, 20 years in this era of what you might call genomic medicine, a preponderance of the research has been done on people of European ancestry. And a lot of progress has been made in recognizing areas of risk for disease that has resulted from that work. However, it's become clear that many of the findings that would have been achieved in studies of people of European ancestry don't necessarily apply to peoples of other ancestries, African or parts of Asia, just for example. And in order to be able to identify risk factors in people of diverse backgrounds, you need to engage people of diverse backgrounds to participate in the research. So it's not going to be good enough to just work in people of European ancestry and then assume that what you've figured out there is going to apply equally well to people of other backgrounds. You need to engage people of diverse backgrounds so that you can learn about the particular risk factors that may be more relevant to them than to other groups. And that's why it's so important for the All of Us research program to be enrolling individuals who have historically been underrepresented in biomedical research, because now is the opportunity to learn about the individual risks that people of all backgrounds face, and to be able to apply the correct information that's most relevant to them. But the only way we're going to know that is by engaging them in participating in these kinds of studies.
Yeah, and I also want to mention for the record, I've signed up as a participant in the program because I want to find out more about, my, health history and future health history. Because right now I'm in my 40s and I want to know, like, well, what will I be more at risk for if I live to be in my 50s and 60s and 70s? And also, like what you mentioned earlier, as far as like certain, like you said, European, but one of the myths I've heard for years, me being an African-American man, is that African-Americans always have high blood pressure. And that's just been like some tossed around myth. And I'm very interested in how the studies go. And I've been very encouraged by the number of people that's of color that look like me that have signed up in the program as well. So I think that's, you all done a great job of trying to dispel that myth.
I certainly hope so. Yeah, one of the things that we've been working very hard on, and I mean, this is true nationally and it's certainly true regionally, is engaging people of diverse backgrounds to participate for the reasons that you were just saying. And, that's accomplished not just by telling people, well, you really need to do this, because otherwise we're not going to have information about your genetic makeup or other factors that will help us offer the kind of precision medicine. Much of it actually involves listening and understanding what people's concerns are, and then being able to address those in a way that people feel comfortable with participating in the research. So, our job, I feel, is not like, to go sell this to different communities and to, try to convince them why they should participate. It's rather to listen to them and understand what are the concerns that they have, whether those concerns are privacy, long periods of time where trust was not earned by the research community. And so it led to a distrust that you can really easily understand the roots of. And the question is, can you hear those concerns and then be able to reassure people that they have been heard and that their kind of concerns are being kind of heeded in how the program is put together. And I'll tell you that from the very start, the All of Us research program has involved members of the community, not just to provide opinions, but to actually be engaged in designing the study and in carrying out, every step of the process. So they're involved in the committees that generated the way the program would be conducted, and they're involved in pretty much every level of management of the program as well. And I think that's been a really important point to make people kind of realize that this is being done with participants as partners, not as subjects. And that's a very important distinction, which is really at the core of the philosophy behind the All of Us research program.
So we are coming across the 5th year anniversary of the National Institutes of Health celebrating the Elevate the month of May action for the All of Us. Just quickly, just give me some quick thoughts. I think you all even have an event on 24th about this, right?
Yeah, so we are 5 years in. Obviously, when the program was put together, COVID wasn't on anybody's mind, and it definitely slowed things down for a while when it wasn't safe to be doing enrollments on a face-to-face basis. But nonetheless, the program has made enormous progress over this time. And we have coming up this month what is called Elevate events. These are opportunities to, it's sort of like put all hands on deck to be as available and accessible as possible to make sure that we can engage and reach as many people as we can, and to remove as many barriers as possible towards enrollment. So yeah, this is going to be a very busy but exciting month in the program, really trying to get the word out and to enroll hopefully record numbers of participants.
Okay, and I guess almost 3 final questions. I have one quick one before we get into the serious one. I have to ask, are you a Boston Red Sox or Celtics fan?
Yeah, well, you noticed I was in Boston for a good portion of my career. Actually, the Red Sox stadium, Fenway Park, is you can walk to it from the medical center, and I did that a fair number of times, and I do still keep track, at least to some extent. I was less of a Celtics fan. I don't know why particularly, but baseball is probably the thing I most grew up with as a sport.
Okay, so if somebody is on what I guess, as far as like a final thought, what would you tell somebody if they're just unsure about joining this program? What would be one thing you think would just like get them over?
Well, I think the most important thing is what I would say is you may learn something about yourself from participating in this program, because, for example, there is a return of results of information, based on your genotyping, for example. So some people will learn about medications that they might be at risk of having a adverse reaction to, or particular genetic factors that predispose to cancer or heart disease. However, I think the real reason to do this is to set the stage for precision medicine for generations to come. So if you're not doing it for yourself, do it for your community, do it for your children and your grandchildren and all those who follow, because people are going to be looking back at this generation as really one that set the stage for a whole new way of thinking about medicine. And, here's the opportunity and time to become a part of that.
Okay, and I guess the easiest question is, if somebody's interested in joining this program, where do they go?
Well, so if you're interested in going online, it's joinallofus.org, and I think there's also a number 833-JOIN-UAB that you can use as well.
And one thing I want to mention as well is that you all have an app as well. So you can download, will make it very easy to join the program. And I can kind of personally tell you all, I've gone through the beginning stages of the program. I haven't got my results back yet, but I've went in, signed in, done the surveys. The surveys are wonderful. They're very in-depth, but they're in-depth about information that they need to get, like going back to the whole thing of precision medicine. So they're precise. So they'll ask you things about your family history and different other, factors about your life. But I'm very interested in what the results come back.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, I had joined very early in the program and only recently got my genetic results back. I wasn't surprised there because it took a while to get all the pieces in place to be able to do the genomics. So people will have the opportunity to learn things about themselves, but the most exciting thing is going to be watching how it transforms medicine over the course of the coming years and realizing that you were a part of that. Okay.
Well, Dr. Korf, thank you for coming on today. I want to say, personally speaking, thank you for your contributions to the medical community, because, I've been impressed. I've came across, like I said, a lot of doctors in my life, but your bio is very impressive. It's all the work you've done over the years.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your efforts to get the word out.
Okay, so you all definitely, thank you all for watching this interview. Please check out what'shappenedbirmingham.com for more interviews, more about the All of Us program. Also, like he said, call that phone number 833-JOIN-UAB or download the All of Us app. It's on the App Store. It's on Google Play, or even visit the website, which I have the little tag, like the website text on there. Thank you all again. Have a great day, and let's join All of Us. Thank you, Dr. Korf.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the What's Happening Birmingham video podcast. Please check out our website, app, or subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest videos today.